Now that tariffs are paused, what is Fidelity doing? We're doing what we do in many of these times with volatilities. Number one, we're not getting emotional. Number two is we're trying to figure out who the winners and losers are and what's the actual variability of sometimes earnings or balance sheet implications. And number three, more importantly, is trying to take advantage where there's maybe an opportunity where the market has sold something off too much in our view versus the actual valuation upside. Some of the sectors then they say are who are the winners and losers at the first glance. First glance is if you're a Canadian company selling into US, you're probably a loser on first glance. And where would some of those show up? Many of them would be in the industrial sector, but you also have to watch other things that are maybe not as obvious, is like financials. We have to watch if tariffs come on, even globally, not just Canada, it's a tax on consumption and usually lowers global GDP. If it lowers global GDP, financials in particular could be hurt, especially if it's a tariff on Canadians. And so we have to watch financials, industrials. The next one, of course, the big one would be resources we have to watch because many of our resources sell into the US. Now, not all of our resources are tariffed at the same rate. It was very clear at the first offering, at least of the tariffs, was 10% for energy, including uranium, but that did not include fertilizer or lumber, which can be used at 25% tariff. But we have to watch, there's a number of sectors that have companies that are great global champions that have most of their revenue actually in the US that are not hurt by this, or in some cases, software, the technology sector, is not affected by this and are usually global champions. And so those in many cases can benefit, especially if they have US dollar revenue, if the currency, which recently has been falling a little bit. So why energy in particular? What's so important there that it's a sensitivity with exports and tariffs in particular? One of the biggest things we have to understand as Canadians, we send a lot of our energy to the US. Big picture numbers for you, 5 million barrels per day we produce, 4 million barrels, give or take, goes to the US. Half of our natural gas goes to the US. Next question you're going to ask me is, why don't we send it to other places? It's just not that easy. It takes a number of years to approve pipelines from the government and to build them. Luckily, recently we have two outlets that are coming on stream or are on stream right now, TMX Pipeline and LNG Canada, which is coming on for gas later this year. But again, the materiality of them is still very minimal as an outlet. So we are still very reliant on the US for sending our resources. The one thing we have to maybe feel comfortable at this juncture, the US also, President Trump has been running on a platform of low energy prices. So putting large tariffs on us may have some knock-on effects, of course, to the consumer because tariffs are usually paid by producers, refiners, and potentially customers. The degree of those three will determine how the actual markets play out. But again, that maybe is one benefit we have why energy was at 10% and everything else was at 25%. They probably didn't want to hurt too much their own US consumer. Again, the biggest thing probably for you, the audience, go back to what I originally said, what you do in a situation like this. Number one, don't get emotional with your personal investments. Sadly, the world has a lot of variability. This is the world we live in. You have to accept it. We're here to make money. We're not here to be emotional. Number two is what we do. We look at who are the winners and losers are. Look in your portfolio. Do you have something skewed one way or the other? If you do, diversification usually solves a lot of your stress. Number three, try to, in this environment, look for opportunities. Is something sold off? Many things sell off in the beginning across the board with no variability. And often there's some great opportunities where you can take advantage of and take advantage of, most importantly, as a great starting point to build capital over time, let the power of compounding take hold. As a steward of your capital, that's what we are doing here, trying to make sure you stay invested. Thank you.